Hello. I am preparing this video because I am noticing that some of my students are encountering difficulties entering calculations involving scientific notation into their calculators and coming up with the correct answers. So what I'm going to do here is just go through some fairly standard examples, point out some common sources of error, and show you how to enter these using a TI calculator. So I'd like to actually start off with an example that doesn't, in fact, involve scientific notation. Let me go ahead and look at this problem right here. Let's say I had 2 times, let's say, 6 divided by 3 times 2. Now, that would be a relatively easy problem for us to do in our head, right? We could go ahead and put in here, well, we know that the numerator is going to be 12, and we know that the denominator will be 3 times 2 is 6, and so we know, of course, 12 divided by 6 is 2. So that is the correct answer. But I find that when students go ahead and enter this in the calculator, many make mistakes on this. For example, you might go ahead and say, well, 2 times 6 divided by 3 times 2, and you're getting 8 as an answer. Well, I think that's clearly wrong, right? We all know that 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 2 is 6, 12 divided by 6 is, in fact, 2. And yet the calculator is giving me 8. And the reason for that is we have to remember that the calculator is following orders of operation, and multiplication and division are equal in terms of order of operation, which means that the calculator will do them in order from left to right. So the calculator is seeing here is 2 times 6 is 12, divided by 3 is 4, times 2 is 8, which is clearly not what we want. Now, there's a couple ways that we could get around this. One way, of course, would be to put parentheses around the numerator and the denominator, or really only around the denominator, but let's go ahead and just put them around both for the time being. So in the parentheses, we could put 2 times 6, and parentheses, divided by 3 times 2. And here we're clearly getting our expected answer. As I mentioned also, if we just have 2 times 6 divided by, and then put only the denominator in parentheses, would also be fine. And get 2. Because the key is here, we need to divide this whole quantity by this. However, probably the fastest way to do a calculation is just to remember that whenever you have a series of things to be multiplied in the numerator and a series of values to be multiplied in the denominator, first of all, the order that you do them doesn't really matter. So the simplest way to do this is simply to multiply all values that are in the numerator and divide by all values in the denominator. And you can do this in any order. So for example, I could say 2 times 6 divided by 3 divided by 2, and you'll notice you get the correct answer of 2. I know that sounds confusing because there's a multiplication sign here, but remember, it's going in order. So this times this, and then you just divide by everything in the denominator. You could do it in any order you want here. You could say 2 divided by 3 times 6 divided by 2, and you'd still get the correct answer. But the key thing here is you just have to remember that you're always dividing by the values which are in the denominator. All right, let's go ahead and introduce some examples which use scientific notation. So let me go ahead and start off here with a relatively simple example. So let me come up with a number here. So let's say we have 4.50 times 10 to the 12. And I want to divide this by 9.30 times 10 to the negative 7. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put this into my calculator. Now remember, the key button that you're looking for when you're entering scientific notation is going to have this symbol EE on it if you're using a Texas Instruments calculator. So again, that would be on a TI instrument, a TI calculator. It will say EE. On some other calculators, it might say EXP. And I've seen times 10 to the X before. But you do not want to use the anti-logarithm, which is, if you look at the keys, you'll usually have a log key with 10 to the X above it. And that is because sometimes you will encounter errors. It tends to work on most calculators about 90% of the time, but then I've noticed that students run into problems when using that. So you want to really restrict yourself to using the button that says EE or EXP. That's what it's designed for. And if you kind of think about it, the way this button works is it means times 10 to the power, which means you don't have to type in a multiplication symbol. It saves you some extra key pushes. And when you're trying to run through an exam on a fairly tight time limit, that's important. Alright, so let me go ahead and enter this in. Now, first of all, I don't need to enter trailing zeros in the calculator. The calculator can't help me with significant digits or significant figures, so I won't enter those zeros. I'll just have to worry about them a little bit later on. So here we go. I enter 4.5, and then times 10 to the power is just second EE on this calculator, the TI-84 Plus, and then 12. And the calculator sees that all as one number here. It will keep that all together. And then I'll say divide by 9.3. I don't need to put in the trailing zero, even though it is significant. 9.3 times 10 to the power. So again, second EE, no multiplication, negative 7. And be sure here not to use the subtraction button. That does work on some calculators, but not all. So we'll put in negative 7, with that being the negative button here. And I go ahead and hit enter. As I said, the calculator pays no attention at all to scientific notation. So, excuse me, not to scientific notation, to significant figures. So going back and looking at significant figures here, our numerator has 3 significant figures. Our denominator has 3. Remember, we're only doing division here, so we only use the multiplication division rules. And since there's 3 digits here and 3 digits here, smallest of those is 3. And we will go ahead and round to 3 significant digits. So that would be 4.838 is a round up number, so 4.84. And then look at the end of the number, E18. So that means times 10 to the 18. 4.84 times 10 to the 18. And that is my final answer. All right, what happens when we start introducing more values? Well, when we start having multiple values involving scientific notation on both the numerator and or the denominator, we typically put those numbers in parentheses to make them look neater. But those parentheses, as we'll see, do not usually have to be entered. They're just visual markers. So let's say I have here 7.38 times 10 to the 15 divided by 2.24 times 10 to the 4th times 1.38 times 10 to the negative 6. And you'll notice all of these have 3 significant figures, so when I go to do the calculation, I'll round to 3 significant figures. Okay, now remember, we have 2 values in the denominator, and even though these are multiplied, the way that we should go about doing this is you multiply everything in the numerator. Well, the only thing in the numerator is this one value, and then divide by everything in the denominator. So let me go ahead and go about doing that. So I have 7.38, scientific notations button, so EE 15, divide by 2.24, scientific notation button, 4, excuse me. And then again, I'm going to divide since this is in the denominator. So divide by 1.38, EE, or scientific notation button, negative 6. And I'll hit enter. And as I said, I need 3 significant digits on this one, so that would be 2.387. 7's the 4th digit, so I round up. That gets rounded up to a 9, 2.39, and then make sure you check the end of the number, times 10 to the 17 here. So 2.39 times 10 to the 17. And that's really all I wanted to illustrate here, but just for the fun of it, I'll go ahead and do one more example. You're welcome to watch it if you want, just to get a little bit more practice, or you could just end your watching experience here. Alright, so one more example. So let's say I'm going to put 2 numbers in the numerator and 2 numbers in the denominator. So I'll have 1.88 times 10 to the 12 times 2.7 times 10 to the 13th divided by 2.26 times 10 to the 5th divided by 1.87 times 10 to the negative 15. So it's a rather tedious problem, in fact probably more tedious than most you'd ever actually be asked to enter. But if you're really good at doing this, you're probably not going to make mistakes with your calculator when you get to the exams. So let me go ahead and enter this one. So 1.88, scientific notation button, 12. Let's just multiply everything in the numerator. So times 2.7, scientific notation button, 13, divided by 2.26, scientific notation button, 5. And then again, since this is in the denominator, we're just going to divide by this. So divided by 1.87 times 10 to the negative 15. So if we go ahead and we take a look here, let's double check to make sure everything went in okay. 1.88 E12, 1.88 E12, 2.7 E13, 2.7 E13, good. 2.26 E5, 2.26 E5, and I'm losing this one, so I need to click over here. Let me go up. 1.8. Well, not letting me do it on this particular calculator, so I'm going to assume I've got that in there correctly. 1.87 times 10 to the minus 15. Alright, so scientific notation on this. First of all, significant digits. 1.88 has 3. 2.7 has only 2. This has 3, this has 3. So the smallest number would be 2. We need 2 significant digits in our answer here. So that would be 1.2, the 0 as a round down number, times 10 to the 35. So 1.2 times 10 to the 35. I hope that you find this useful, and for those of you that are attempting the Mole Mastery Quiz P4, this will give you the skills that you need to be successful in completing that. Thank you.